Hey, listeners, just a quick strip in to let you know that the show was already in post-production. When the news came in about the verdict, the Trump guilty verdict on all criminal counts. So we will be dealing with that in the future, but just to let you know why, this week we are not yet dealing with it. Those are the exigencies of a weekly show. But we'll get to it. This is an election year. We will get to everything.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And we have a delightful program for you today. Mona Eltahawy is here. You may remember her, if you're a regular listener, from many visits before. She is the Egyptian feminist who is irrepressible and outrageous and absolutely a delight. Funny and wonderful, and you can't shut her up, and you won't want to anyway. And she says she'll meet you for dinner, and then she calls and says, I got busted for defacing patriarchal walls. Whatever. She is a piece of work. And I'm so pleased that now that COVID is over, where she was under lockdown, and then that got followed, as we will hear, from a huge problem and a backslide for her in menopause, which she has transformed into new insight and soon to be new books. So she's here, and so that we don't have to waste a whole lot of time, I'm going to go directly to her after Inside the Headlines. I'm afraid we have to lamentably return to Justice, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Samuel Alito, again this week, because he made an explanation in a letter to Congress and also to Roberts, the Chief Justice, as to why he will not recuse himself from upcoming decisions about the violent insurgency against the People's House, against Congress itself, which killed a number of people and which we've been trying to recover from ever since on January 6th. So two decisions are upcoming, including a conspiracy decision, and one of them also involves former President Trump and might keep him from running again. But anyway, so Alito is not going to recuse himself. He doesn't feel that the flying of the flags by apparently his wife should disqualify him in any way. It's only his most recent go. The arrogance of the man takes your breath away. In June, he published an opinion essay in the Wall Street Journal explaining why he was not required to disqualify himself from cases involving a billionaire who had provided him with travel and a private jet. And in September, he issued a statement rejecting demands from Democratic lawmakers that he recuse himself from a pending case after a lawyer involved in the matter interviewed him for the Wall Street Journal, the same paper. Now, his refusal to recuse in the January 6th case comes as the court's been under growing pressure to address potential conflicts of interest. And he is apparently adopting the same accounting methods that he used in his opinion essay in the Wall Street Journal, saying that he was not required to disclose a trip on the private jet of a billionaire who frequently had cases before the court because he had flown in, quote, a seat that, as far as I am aware, would have otherwise been vacant, period, close quote. Well, there seem to be a number of things of which the Associate Justice is unfortunately unaware. For example, the disaster that he caused people in some of these following decisions that he participated in the court as part of the court's extreme ultra-right, now majority. He joined conservative majorities in Gonzales versus Carhart in 2007, which upheld the misnamed Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act of 2003. In District of Columbia versus Heller in 2008, which established that the Second Amendment protects every individual's right to possess firearms. In Shelby County versus Holder in 2013, that struck down a key provision of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and of course the infamous Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission in 2010, which limited the ability of Congress to regulate political expenditures by corporations and by unions. And the last case led to an unusual incident in presidential court relations, by the way, because while attending President Obama's 2010 State of the Union address before Congress, Alito apparently responded to Obama's criticism of the ruling by wincing and shaking his head and mouthing the words, "not true." To do this during a State of the Union has just never been heard of, much less by an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. Alito also wrote majority opinions in some prominent cases that split the court along ideological lines. In Ledbetter versus Goodyear Tire and Rubber, 2007, he argued that statutes of limitations apply to wage discrimination claims even when the victim is unaware of the discrimination until after the period for bringing claims has elapsed. Incredible. In McDonald versus City of Chicago, 2010, he extended the Heller Court's Second Amendment analysis to the states. That's gun carrying. In 2014, the Supreme Court announced two controversial conservative decisions written by Alito. Burwell versus Hobby Lobby Stores, Inc., which recognized a right of closely held private corporations to obtain, on the grounds of religious liberty, exemptions from generally applicable laws. And Harris versus Quinn declined to extend, and in fact severely criticized, a series of labor cases, ruling that certain workers paid by the state could not be required to pay union fees. In Glossop versus Gross, 2015, he upheld Oklahoma's use of the sedative midazolam in lethal injections, placing the burden of proof on the plaintiffs, a group of condemned prisoners, to show that the state's method of execution presented a substantial risk of severe pain and that alternative methods of capital punishment were available. He said, well, they had to prove that. But of course you can't prove it when you're dead. In Brnovich versus Democratic National Committee in 2021, he ruled that restrictive state voting laws that disproportionately burden members of racial minority groups do not violate the Voting Rights Act, despite the law's prohibition of any voting standard, practice, or procedure which results in a denial or abridgment of the right of any citizen of the United States to vote on account of race or color. That's in Section 2. In 2022, an apparent draft of a majority opinion, this was the infamous leak, in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, written by Alito, was leaked to a news publication of an extraordinary breach of protocol. In public speeches, Alito, a lifelong Roman Catholic, expressed concern that the United States was moving away from its traditional support of religious liberty. Not surprisingly, his interest in religious liberty was also reflected in his judicial opinions, as in the Hobby Lobby case. Similarly, writing in dissent in Obergefell, Alito worried about the consequences of the majority's finding of a constitutional right to same-sex marriage for the free expression of traditional religious beliefs and values. Quote, I assume that those who cling to old beliefs will be able to whisper their thoughts in the recesses of their homes, he wrote. But if they repeat those views in public, they will risk being labeled as bigots and treated as such by governments, employers, and schools. Close quote. Incredible. not only conservatism, arch conservatism, but the arrogance, the sense of entitlement that goes with it, just makes it hard to breathe. We have to take a short break here, but we will be back in just a moment with the guest for the conversation today, who is the irrepressible, irreplaceable, impossible, outrageous author, Mona Eltahawy herself, coming right up. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
My guest for today's conversation is Mona Eltahawy, who is a freelance Egyptian-American journalist and social commentator who's based in New York City now. She's written essays and op-eds for publications worldwide on Egypt and on the Islamic world and on women's rights and patriarchy and on Muslim political and social affairs. And her work, oh my God, it has appeared in the Washington Post, the New York Times, Christian Science Monitor, the Miami Herald, many, many newspapers and magazines and headscarves and hymens. Her first book was published in May of 2015. She's been a guest analyst on U.S. and radio and television talk shows. She spearheaded, among others, spearheaded the Mosque Me Too movement by using the hashtag Mosque Me Too. And she's spoken publicly at universities and panels and interfaith gatherings on human rights and reform in the Islamic world and on feminism. She is decidedly a feminist. She graduated from the American University in Cairo in 1990, and in 92, she earned a master's degree in mass communication with a concentration in journalism. Well, you'll hear, because when you uncork her, she bubbles out. So I give you with great delight to have her back, Mona Eltahawy. Welcome back to the program. It's so good that you're back, and you've been through the ringer, haven't you, my dear?
I have indeed, Robin. Thank you for having me back. I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad to be in a much better shape and place than I've been for a few years now.
Oh, sweetheart. Oh, tell all.
Menopause. Menopause.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be mena stop in your tracks, not just menopause.
Exactly.
Oh boy. Well, it's wonderful that you're going to be doing a book on it, and because you're shining light on a hitherto unmentionable part of the body and part of the world, which only merely more than half the human species engages in, but never mind. Go ahead, tell. What happened?
Yes. I had no idea what I was going through until years later when a friend of mine who wrote a book called What Fresh Hell Is This? Their name is Heather Corinna. They use they, them pronouns. So their name is Heather Corinna. And they told me that perimenopause this is the stage leading up to menopause,
right?
Could last between 10 to 14 years. And I'm like, what? Excuse me, fuck, what?
What?
Right? Who knew? I honestly, feminist as I am.
Yeah, that starts right after you get your period. Then, I mean, what the hell is that? Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, feminist as I am, I thought, you know what? One day my period's going to stop. and that's menopause. And whoa, did I not know
Ah,
anything. I was wholly unprepared. And so in looking back, in hindsight, thanks to what Heather told me, I realized that so many and I love that they use the word impact rather than symptom, because menopause is not a disease. So
right.
many of the impacts that I was experiencing were those impacts of perimenopause. So, for example, anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
insomnia, vaginal dryness,
Mm-hmm.
painful sex,
Mm-hmm.
so many things that I just thought, what's going on?
Right,
And so much
exactly.
of it down there, as we were talking earlier, and, down there and the unmentionables,
Yeah,
which is why then I began to mention everything, because we
right.
have to mention them.
That's right. Yeah. So you began to, but meanwhile you were unable to sleep or having sweats or nauseas or whatever. I mean, meanwhile you were going through this, yes? And this
Yeah.
overlapped with COVID. What a double whammy that must have been.
Oh my God, Robin, there were days when I was like, okay, am I dying of COVID or is this menopause? It was like, which
I don't
one
know
is
why
it?
I'm laughing. It's just, oh God, that's a
You
terrible
have to
choice.
laugh.
Yeah,
What else is there?
yeah, yeah. So go on, go on.
But the more I shared, like I would go on Twitter and I'd be like, what the fuck is happening? And the more I shared, the more I would say things like, is this COVID or is this menopause? The more people wrote and shared their own experiences. And it became obvious that we need to talk about menopause. Now,
Yeah,
I'm not suggesting I invented talking about menopause. Far from it. I know that generations that came before us talked about menopause, but they didn't have social media.
that's
They
right.
talked amongst themselves.
That's
I'm
right.
sure my mother and her friends talked amongst themselves, but they didn't have Twitter and Instagram and all these other platforms that we can use. So now my generation, Gen X, are using every single platform available to us to shout the loudest that we can menopause, and let's talk about it and let's break the stigma, because there is nothing stigmatizing or nothing that should be taboo about this stage in life. And of course, at the heart of it is ageism.
Yeah,
This
of
is
course.
why we want to talk about it. This is why
That's
it's
right.
supposed to be a shame and a taboo, because women are not supposed to get old, are we?
No, 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 no. We're supposed to be perpetually young and perky and I don't know, nausea provoking. But you're quite right. It's a mask. It's one of the masks of aging and of ageism.
Yeah.
And there's such a terror about it because of that. I mean, and there was for a brief while there was a whole thing about male menopause, and
Mm-hmm.
it was interesting because it surfaced and then it went right under again. Did you notice that?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a scientific discovery that men, in fact, went through certain chemical changes at a certain period of their life, and there were emotional changes as well. And this got named, for better or worse, male menopause. But
Yeah.
it didn't stick, or it wasn't allowed to stick, or it wasn't allowed to be seriously looked at because nobody wanted to admit that men who were not anything except white male and human and young,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, so basically, only we're the ones who are never allowed to get old, because at the heart of that
Right.
ageism, one of the reasons for the existence of that ageism is that we can't perpetually pop out babies,
That's
and
the
they
main
need those
reason.
babies, right?
Right.
They need those babies for workers, for soldiers,
For
for
war.
all of those things. Yeah, exactly, that patriarchy demands labor and war, and
Right.
when our uterus is no longer the means of production. This
That's
is
right.
why I'm an anarchist, because my womb is not the means to your production.
Yeah.
Then we're irrelevant and useless.
Yeah.
And so it's all part of that cycle, isn't it? So menstruation, we were talking earlier, menstruation was a big, big taboo. We've broken to a large extent that taboo in many parts of the world. Motherhood was also that you could only talk about motherhood in a certain way, where it was beautiful and perfect and not
Right.
messy and not painful. And
Right.
every mother was delighted to pop out babies.
Yeah.
But you couldn't talk about how the pain or the messiness, or those of us who choose to be child free, you
Yeah.
couldn't talk about that. So that was the M for motherhood. So there's like 3 M's that are all taboos: menstruation, motherhood, and then menopause.
Right.
And you get to menopause and it's like every taboo is thrown at you, because then you become what they've told you all your life you can never become, which is old and shriveled up and no more popping out babies. And I'm like, you know what? I never wanted to pop out babies for you anyway. So fuck off and let me deal with this.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You also become, interestingly, sexless. Now I mean that in a very specific way. I don't mean unsexy. I mean without the appurtenances of, in other words, old women are seen in many cultures as the epitomes of wisdom, of accumulated knowledge, etc. And they are. But in part, that is because they have been desexed of their femininity.
Mm-hmm,
You
mm-hmm.
know,
And yeah, absolutely. And I think, that is a good and a not so good aspect of the menopausal transition.
precisely.
Because, I love the wisdom that comes. I love this not giving a fuck about what anyone, most of my life I haven't given a fuck about what anyone thinks anyway. But
Yeah,
especially
I've
so
noticed.
at this age. I think that's why we're friends, Robin.
Yeah, I kind of noticed that. Yeah, early on I noticed it.
Thank you, feminism. So, that aspect of, I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks is like doubled, tripled, quadrupled as we go through the menopause transition.
Yeah.
And then, so I welcome the wisdom, but this idea that we're desexed, I think that needs to also be deconstructed and like dismantled, because unsexed to who? Is it because we're still, because
In the
we're not producing
patriarchy.
the babies for, absolutely, because we're not producing the babies for them anymore, because we're not pliable, because we're not, constantly starving ourselves or making ourselves look a particular way for them.
We have
And therefore,
become, we are perceived as becoming human.
human,
Yeah,
human and ungovernable. They can no longer, that
that's
patriarchy
true.
and its hold on us can no longer govern us, because we become this uncontrollable. This is where the whole witch, crone, everything comes in, right?
That's
You're
right.
uncontrollable. You're ungovernable. And like, fucking finally, my God.
I've been waiting for this my whole life. And I'll tell you something from the other side of menopause. Since I'm now 83, believe it or not. I don't know how this happened.
Yay.
I tell my friends, last week I was 38 and I blinked and I don't, how did that? But anyway, I am, and not so bad because I produced 3 books in the last 3 years, so that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But the thing is that I'm from the other side of menopause. It like so much of one's younger years, begins to recede, and you look at it as a hilariously funny. Now, maybe you will not because you had such a rough time with it, and I had an easier time with it, I think, than you. Not an easy time, mind you, not at all an easy time.
Yeah.
Because it coincided with the death of my mother, and it coincided with the breakup of my marriage, and but easier than you because I was able to write. So it wasn't paralyzing in that terrifying way that it was for you. God, that's awful. But
Mhm.
it strikes me as very funny now, and funny that it should ever have been otherwise. Does that make
Mm.
sense? In other words, it's like, oh yeah, okay, this is like when you're, when you're 8 years old. Well, let's say you're 6 years old and you're quite independent, and you
Yes.
don't take guff off anybody, but you can't quite reach the light switches.
Yes.
Well, now you can reach the light switches, and so,
Yes. Yes.
plus all the other stuff. So it's just like, yeah, well, haven't I always been this way? You don't
Yes.
misremember the years when you weren't. You remember them quite painfully and acutely, but it
Yeah.
recedes in other words, this state that you're beginning to experience stays with you, and it only increases with age, which is why they fear age.
And I am delighted to hear that. And this is one of the reasons that I treasure my friendships with older women and older people generally, because we need to hear that. We need to hear what's ahead, because the way patriarchy presents menopause to us is as the end.
Yeah.
And it's not the end. It's a transition, and it's a transition to something that I'm really excited about. But I'm still figuring out what is there ahead and what to be excited about. And so when I hear you say that, I'm like, yes, that's it. I want to reach out and head and run towards that. And one of the things that I found most astounding about my own menopause transition is that without knowing it, I shaved off all of my hair during lockdown because I had red hair for reasons, for reasons that had to do with my assault by the right police in Egypt and my own rebellion and all of that. And fuck you, I survived. You didn't kill me. But one of the things that I didn't realize in shaving off all of my hair is that I was basically resembling my much younger self, that pre-pubescent self that you're talking about. Because when I look at pictures of myself now, I look like Mona did when she was 10 years old.
Aww.
And I'm like, oh my God, I have the same hairstyle that I had when I was 10, 11, 12. I'm like, look at that. So I basically kind of like reached out and touched that younger Mona and said to her, hey, we made it. Here we are.
That's right.
I'm like, we're holding hands now, walking towards what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. It's the Carol Gilligan. I always think of it for shorthand. It's the Carol Gilligan 12-year-old. Before she hits puberty, before the culture really clamps down on her.
Yeah.
It's when she stands with her feet apart and her hands on her hips and says, "You're not the boss of me." She is a little creature, by God, not so little either. And then it begins to crunch on her from all sides.
Oh my God! And look at the decades it takes us.
Yeah.
To reclaim the power of that girl again and to tell her, thank you, I honor you, thank you.
Yeah. It's quite extraordinary. I mean, I will say this, but then again, I was plagued with some illnesses because Gloria and I have this joke, that we quote Betty Davis saying, "Old age is not for sissies." And it's true. It's true, but it's true, and it's true in both in the good and the bad ways. And in my case, it's when Parkinson's came, and it's when cancer came, and it's all these little fun things. But so far, I'm surviving them, and I'm writing, and I'm okay. And that's the part. It's the getting up again, struggling to one's feet again. That's the interesting part,
It's a strength and a power that for the longest time we aren't always aware that we have because of all of the punches of the patriarchy that we're constantly fighting off.
That's right.
And I think when we go through the menopause transition, I mean, I'm almost 2 years now into postmenopause because I became postmenopausal in November of 2022. So this year will mark 2 years. So I'm relatively new to postmenopause and loving it so far. Thanks to, all the things that I know. I'm on hormone therapy. I'm not toughing it out anymore. I don't have to. And I'm thinking now, like the din of patriarchy in my head that would take so much energy just to punch my way through so I can get to what I wanted to do. That din has quietened now. Yes. And I think that I'm assuming that's what you're saying about when you recognize you have that strength and power to get up. Because you're not constantly fighting off the punches and the blows of patriarchy.
Yeah, that's very much part of it. You're damn right. And also it's that you develop in yourself a kind of quietude, a kind of I've written a couple of poems about that. It's a kind of self-sustenance where you spin it out of yourself like a spider. An arachnid. You spin your own beautiful orb web, and you can traverse on it. It's absolutely wonderful. I mean, I would like to be in better physical shape, but I can't help that. And given the situation, I'm very pleased with the way that I am actually. And I think older women have only begun to plumb their depths. You should excuse the expression. Because I think that there's rage and at lost chances, at chances gone by, as well as resolve about the future, and the future shortens as well, of course. So
things seem to be coming into more focus and. Focus on the things that I want to focus on rather than the things that I think I should be focusing on. And the letting go, I mean, the liberation in the letting go and in relishing what I want to relish and not having that din, and not having to address everything, and not having to be accountable to anyone. All of that, I think this is exactly why patriarchy wants us to fear getting old, especially as women, wants us to fear the menopause transition, wants us to fear all of that, because it recognizes that we just cut loose.
Yeah.
And my God, what are we going to do with, all of these women who've just cut loose? And I think this is one of the things that we have to tell younger people, like look at what lies ahead. Yes, I can see the struggle you're in because I was there, 20 years ago, whatever it was,
Right.
or whatever number of decades ago it was. But look at what lies ahead. And this is why I write about menopause, because I can now. Finally, I'm writing again. But I also want, the people who follow me, the people who read me, to know that this is wonderful. This is terrifying. This is amazing. This is all of the things. And this is also incredibly liberating. Mm-hmm. And that's the message that I want. I want patriarchy to fear, and that I want younger people to relish.
I love it. Tell me some of the things that you want to do now that you didn't do before, or because it seems that you've led a rather active life. I'm not concerned.
Well, one of the things that I'm really enjoying now is writing about anything I want when I want. I used to have a very specific focus to my writing when I was younger. And now I just write about anything. Like today, I wrote a short piece for a series that I have on my newsletter, Feminist Giant. I've started a series called The Wonder Chronicles that basically looks at wonder and how we need wonder in our world. And today's Wonder Chronicle coincides with International Masturbation Day. So I wrote a piece about the wonder of masturbation.
Oh, darling, you are irrepressible, impossible, and absolutely marvelous.
Thank you. Yeah. And one of the reasons I started the series is because I told people, because I want you. I mean, I end every single one of these episodes or installments by saying my goal that you are found by wonder, my wish that you intensely live. And I think this is one of the things that I'm really enjoying now. So I'm writing about anything that I want. I've just finished editing an anthology on menopause called Bloody Hell, which will be coming out in March to coincide with International Women's Day.
Bravo.
And I'm working on a memoir called How Hatshepsut Helped Me Unbecome. So I use the Egyptian pharaoh as my role model of the unbecoming that I describe the menopause transition as being, that I've unbecome so that I can become who I'm meant to be.
Yes, because that's precisely what she did. I mean, there are even the statues of her. Well, most of them have been defaced by later patriarchies, but there are still some images remaining which show her with a little beard. Because because she was told, well, pharaohs have beards. She said, all right, what the hell? I mean, everybody knows I'm me, so I'll wear a little cosmetic beard, but now and then. But mostly she was herself, and her lover, of course, built her tomb. You've been to her tomb?
I've been to her temple. Her temple is incredible.
Yeah, I know.
To think of Hatshepsut as the most powerful person in the ancient world for 20 years. The pharaoh of Egypt, who basically, Hatshepsut instigated the kind of the most intense period of building and industrialization, for lack of a better term,
and peace
construction. Yeah, peace and construction.
I went through the buildings and you do the Valley of the Kings, and it's always this pharaoh smote that group and this one smites someone else. They're always smiting. They're smiting all over the place. And then you come to Hatshepsut's temple, which is low and rounded and graceful and sits in the cliff because it was designed and built by her lover, who was a great architect, and all of the frescoes or decorations that are left that haven't been defaced are of prisoners released from Punt. Happy prisoners dancing in their release by Hatshepsut. It's a totally different reality. It's incredible. Go on.
And what a wonderful story of Hatshepsut's story is, contrasted to Cleopatra, who is the pharaoh that they love to obsess over, right?
Of
because
course.
Of the two men that her story is told through the eyes of.
That's right.
And I'm like, I don't, you know what? Hatshepsut didn't kill herself over some fucking man. Hatshepsut was powerful for 2 decades.
Yeah.
So I'm using Hatshepsut as that role model for me. And also the ways that Hatshepsut muddied all of those he, she, they pronouns for as Hatshepsut ruled basically the ancient world for 20 years. Because I think also one of the wonderful things about the menopause transition is that it forces us to ask, am I not a woman anymore just because I can't reproduce for you? Because that can't be the only thing that made me a woman, right?
Of course not.
And so I'm right. So I'm writing against biological essentialism. I'm writing against this idea that I'm no longer useful, quote unquote. And I'm looking at Hatshepsut as an Egyptian, and I'm completely anti-monarchical. Fuck the monarchy everywhere.
I know. But
I'm looking at Hatshepsut though as somebody who just took all the things that she, he, they, whatever they wanted to use, was told that she could do or could not do, and said, "Watch me," and did them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, she was amazing. Amazing. I mean, I've always thought that she and Empress Wu were just what they would have had to be in order to exist. Elizabeth Tudor, for that matter, too. They stand out in history with, healed thumbs, not sore thumbs, because they're so remarkably different and remarkably helpful and healthful. Full of health. So, have you tell me about the feminist giant and tell what it is, and let's get people subscribed to it and so forth.
Well, thank you, Robin. It's my newsletter, which goes out several times a week. I started it during lockdown because, those of us who were privileged enough to be working from home and didn't have to leave the house during a global pandemic, had to work and had to make a living. And so I started this newsletter so that I could write what I want when I wanted, like I said. And it's a combination of my own personal essays that go out. I try to aim, at the beginning, I was writing an essay a week. Now I try to aim for, when the writing comes, because I'm still writing again after this period of silence during the menopause transition. But it's my personal essays, and it's twice weekly, what I call global roundups, which are curated by a paid contributor called Samiha Hussein. She is a young feminist who she basically scours international media for stories of feminist resistance from around the world.
Wonderful.
And curates 5 articles just to show that feminist resistance is alive and global. So that goes out twice a week. And once a week, the Wonder Chronicles goes out to urge people to wonder at various things. And it's a completely free newsletter, so you can subscribe for free. But I urge people who can pay to pay, because it helps to keep it free. It helps me to pay Samiha, and it helps me to pay my rent.
Absolutely. I will subscribe immediately when we hang up this phone.
Thank you. Thank you.
What is the website? It's just Feminist Giant?
FeministGiant.com.
FeministGiant.com. All right.
Yeah.
This sounds like a real goodie, and it's a way to get all of your writing while you're writing it, fresh out of the oven. We're still warm.
You'll get it delivered into your inbox. Exactly.
That's amazing, sweetheart. So you haven't been traveling. You haven't been trotting the globe because of first COVID and then this menopause pause.
Well, and then, but interestingly, Robin, and then also a lack of desire to basically run around in the way that I used to. And I think this is also part of what the changes of postmenopause.
That I understand. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just before the height of my menopause transition that coincided with lockdown. So in 2019, I spent three quarters of that year, excuse me, 3/4 of that year traveling. And I was exhausted. During lockdown, I was exhausted. And then when lockdown lifted and I started to travel again, I was like, this, first of all, post-lockdown travel was incredibly difficult just because of, all that you had to get, proof of not having COVID and all of that stuff.
Permits and
even now, I'm like, I have been to so many countries. I have been to so many places. I am less interested in the external travel and much more interested in the internal travel. As trite as that sounds.
No, it's
Because
not trite. It is not trite at
right?
all. No, it's not.
I mean, when I say to you, of all people, you will understand this. I'm interested in exploring the universe of Mona rather than
Hmm.
the universe out there. You
Yeah,
know what I mean.
of course I do. Of course I do. And I think it is something that one earns, um, and I do think that those of us who have been both blessed and cursed by lives of activism
Mm.
um, need to learn it. And if we can learn it, it's very rewarding. But it's a very
Right?
different. It's a different kind of world. I mean, it took illness to refocus me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and because Parkinson's is a degenerative disease, it continues. You don't die of it, but you die of something related to it, whatever you get
Mm-hmm.
it. but because of that, um, because the good news was that the brain surgery worked brilliantly, and if I'm sitting at my desk working, you don't know the
Yeah.
difference. You don't know I have it. The bad news is that when I stand up, I fall over because it doesn't affect balance. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a problem. But it's not an insurmountable. As long as my brains are intact and I can write and I can sit at my desk. I can reach the world,
Yes.
and I don't have to go there.
Yes. I really, really appreciate that refocus, as you call it, because for the longest time, all I wanted to do was to go out there and just
I know
see
you
what was
did.
out there and take myself out there and exhaust myself. I was fine exhausting myself. I would just go out there and just like feel every single well and come back and just like collapse for a week or so and then go out there again. But in that running, in that constant running, I was missing so much of who I was and who I am. And I'm standing still now and
Hmm.
really enjoying it and thinking, wow, okay, all that experience I have inside me, but I never took the time to really unpack it. I never took the time to really digest or synthesize it. And now I'm in a place finally where I can, and I really appreciate that. So I'm so incredibly lucky and privileged to have had all those adventures
Hmm.
outside
Hmm.
because they
Yes,
have enriched me for these journeys inside. And I'm
precisely.
delighted to be here.
Yeah, precisely. It's as if one was, preparing fields for planting, and now they're planted and they've begun to grow. I mean,
Yes.
I can think of lots of different metaphors, but it's a whole process that um, that this part of life, particularly in women, was made for. I mean, men have turned it into old corporate white male power that has
Yeah.
young, porn stars on their arms. But that's the worst of patriarchy. That's not the best of it. That's not the best. There is no best of patriarchy, but that's not the best of men who can try, usually more easily when they grow older, if they have a sensitive soul, um,
Yeah.
to 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 obtain a third being, a third way of being. But
Yeah.
I don't think it's that common, unfortunately, and I hope it will become more so. I'm so
Yeah.
delighted to hear this. There were people who would say to me, because they knew that we were friends, um, God, doesn't the woman ever stop? And I would say, and I would always say, she will. She will give her, she's going to the field and she's, inputting now. She's inputting, and she will stop at a certain point, uh, and and then it'll take a while, and then she'll start outputting. So
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't be more delighted to hear all this, darling. I really am so
Thank you, Robin.
pleased for you. I'm so pleased, and
Thank
I know from things that I've seen on the website or various things that you've gone to the gym and that you're lifting things, you're lifting weights, and you're this amazing Wonder Woman.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm
Wonder
very strong now.
Wonder Old Woman. Yeah, yeah, fantastic. Just fantastic. Oh God. All right,
Thank you.
sweetheart. Well, thank you. And thank you for everything. And we will look forward to Bloody Hell the
anthology.
The anthology on menopause. That's very important, and that's out in March, is it?
In March, yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And to another volume of the memoir.
Thank you, Robin. It's been a delight to talk to you as always.
We have to take another quick break, but then I'll return with some fighting words. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Come home, evangelicals. All is forgiven. We can start again. Those are fighting words. A clipping I saved from the New York Times, written by Jodi Kantor and Joe Becker, is about how a former anti-abortion leader, an evangelical, is now alleging another Supreme Court breach. That was back when the recently released draft opinion by Justice Alito had surfaced. No one knew by whom, although it was suspected that Alito himself had done it. Okay, so in a letter to Chief Justice John Roberts, to which, to date, there's been no response, and in interviews with the New York Times, the Reverend Rob Schenck, S-C-H-E-N-C-K, Schenck, he said that he had been told the outcome of a case in 2014, weeks before it was announced, and he'd used that information to prepare a public relations push, which is what he did. And he said that at the last minute he tipped off the president of Hobby Lobby, the craft store chain owned by Christian evangelicals, who were the winning party in the case before the court. Of course, both court decisions, Hobby Lobby and Dobbs, were wild successes for the religious right. But the leak of the draft opinion overturning the constitutional right to abortion, a story broken by Politico, set off a national uproar, while the Hobby Lobby decision leak was shared with only a handful of advocates. Yet you hear it here. Schenck's allegation creates an interesting situation. A minister who spent years at the center of the anti-abortion movement had now suddenly turned whistleblower. Actually, it had been coming for some time. There's also a denial by a sitting justice, Alito again, who seems to have a difficulty with the truth, and the court shows a deep reluctance to get to the bottom in either case. The whistleblower minister who used to lead an evangelical nonprofit in D.C. said he had learned about the Hobby Lobby opinion because of his work for years trying to exploit the court's permeability, gaining access to favors traded with gatekeepers and through wealthy donors to his organization, abortion opponents, whom he called stealth missionaries. The minister's account comes at a time when there are growing concerns about the court's legitimacy, with approval ratings at a historic low. In early June of 2014, an Ohio couple, who were Reverend Schenck's star donors, shared a meal with Justice Alito and his wife, Martha Ann. A day later, Gail Wright, also present, contacted Schenck in an email, writing, "Rob, if you want some interesting news, please call. No emails." Schenck said Mrs. Wright told him that the decision would be favorable to Hobby Lobby and that Alito had written it. 3 weeks later, that is precisely what happened. The court ruled 5-4, requiring family-owned businesses or corporations to pay for insurance covering contraception violated their religious freedoms. The decision would have major implications for birth control access, for Obama's new health care law, and for corporations' ability to claim religious rights. Alito, in a statement, denied disclosing the decision, saying that he and his wife shared, quote, a casual and purely social relationship with the Wrights, a statement challenged by their appointment diaries, and said that the allegation was false. So did Mrs. Wright in a phone interview. A representative for Hobby Lobby would not comment. The whistleblower minister had not been present at the meal himself, but the New York Times interviewed 4 people who said he had told them years earlier about the breach, and emails from 2014 show him directing his staff to prepare for a conservative decision. In another email, sent in 2017, he described the disclosure as, quote, one of the most difficult secrets ever kept in my life, period, close quote. I should think so. And it's kind of stunning how evangelical Christians and devout Roman Catholic believers can find it so easy and so politic and so convenient to lie. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on social media at The Robin Morgan. You can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net, and you can find my new novel, Parallax, and my just-out new book of poems, Harvesting Darkness, wherever books are sold. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer, as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer for this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us next time on Women's Media Center Live.